In my opinion, it's very possible that at WWDC this year, we're going to see some more Pro apps brought to the iPad. And as I talked about previously, the iPad Pro is now in laptop territory. We've got keyboard and cursor support while still letting touch be the dominant interface. iPads are now going to be considered more alternatives to MacBooks than ever before. So in today's video, I wanted to share with you guys a concept, an idea I've had for a long time. Basically, consider this video my pitch to Apple as how you can make iPad hardware not just capable of replacing things like the MacBook Air or perhaps the 13-inch MacBook Pro, but now getting to the point where this iPad could replace your 16-inch MacBook Pro as well. So let me introduce to you the iPad Pro Max. Let's begin. So for starters, I wanted to put a bunch of stuff in this design that I would utilize myself. So firstly, I've wanted more I/O to the iPad since as long as I've had an iPad. And now that we have things like external drive support and more USB-C accessories becoming compatible with the iPad, it makes the most amount of sense to me to maximize how many USB-C ports this thing has. And to make it more MacBook-like, we put the USB-C ports on the bottom of this iPad Pro. Yes, 4 in total. No, they're not Thunderbolt 3 because you would need Intel for those, but they are USB 4, which is ultimately basically the same thing. So it's the same USB-C type connector, but it has Thunderbolt 3 speeds while still being open source. So USB 4 does not require Intel CPUs. The current USB-C port on iPad Pros is like USB 3.1. Like, it's not Thunderbolt 3 fast, but it's pretty fast. So taking this iPad Pro concept to the max and giving it USB 4 allows for really high-speed data transfer, which will be super helpful for people who are using this thing with external drives or importing files from a camera directly to the iPad. More important thing though, I should address right out the gate, is the display. This is a 16-inch iPad. Yes, I understand a lot of you guys think that's overkill and you think it's crazy, but my point is this iPad Pro is honestly not really meant to be used in handheld mode that often. Yes, it will be an option. You can use it without the keyboard and mouse if you like, but having used the 11-inch iPad Pro and the 12.9-inch iPad now pretty extensively, it feels like to me 11-inch iPad Pro makes a whole lot of sense for handheld. 12.9-inch iPad Pro, that can do a lot of both. You can handhold it, but also makes a lot of sense to use as a laptop replacement. But the iPad Pro Max concept is meant to almost be used in laptop mode for the majority of its life, which is why we designed so many things differently with this concept. For one, the Apple logo on the back being fixated in a more landscape orientation because this thing is meant to be dominantly used in landscape. Yes, you can use it in portrait, but we know because it's such a large display, that probably won't be very often. And that's also why, pay very close attention to this, the Face ID sensors have been moved to the longer side, similar to how it is on a MacBook. So while you don't have that crappy 720p webcam, since this is a concept, I want to just go ahead and put the iPhone 11 front-facing camera in there. That way you can get up to 4K at 60 on the front-facing camera, but you still have Face ID, just not in a place that you're going to be covering up all the time. So you unlock this thing with Face ID, even though, yeah, for the most part, it's going to be used like a laptop. The other thing you probably noticed on the back is dual smart connector ports. There's actually a fairly logical reason for this because I wanted this thing to have faster power and data transfer speeds, and currently the smart connector only supports 5 watts. So we decided, with the sake of making this thing very symmetrical, might as well put another smart connector on the other side because it's not like 13-inch iPad accessories are going to work with this thing anyway. So once you have 2 smart connectors on the back, that means you can get a combined charge rate of 10 watts to the iPad instead of 5, and you could get data speeds a little bit faster if you decide to use that USB-C port attached to the Magic Keyboard accessory this thing would ship with. So another novel idea that I don't really have a photo to demonstrate, but because this thing is primarily meant to be an alternative to the 16-inch MacBook Pro, I'm going to go ahead and suggest that the keyboard case ships standard with this iPad because I don't think there's a lot of people that would use the iPad Pro Max just as a tablet. I feel like if you're just buying a tablet, the 13-inch iPad Pro is fine. So this thing is going to ship with the keyboard case by default, but of course that would drive up the price. I totally get that. But again, if it's an alternative to the 16-inch MacBook Pro, we have a lot more price to work with because that thing starts at $2,400. So including the keyboard case is not honestly that crazy. But one thing I think a lot of people will appreciate on this concept is the massive size of that trackpad. So a common concern I've seen a lot with the Magic Keyboard case coming out next month is that trackpad looks kind of small compared to MacBooks. So I thought if they went to the Max and they gave this keyboard case full-on MacBook treatment, then yeah, we could have a trackpad that's much larger for those pro apps that want to utilize cursor support, whether it be Final Cut, Logic, or Xcode. You'll have more flexibility with this accessory compared to the trackpads that are coming out next month. You're going to have 4 USB 4 ports on this iPad, 2 on either side, just like a MacBook, so you can charge it from either side, all of which are full speed, which gives you plenty of I/O for plugging in accessories and stuff like that. But also, you have that USB-C Type-C port in the Magic Keyboard case as well. So now that you can get a 10-watt charge rate to the iPad instead of just 5, it's safe to assume that, yeah, a 16-inch iPad would probably use more power, but I think it would sustain the charge, or at least increase the charge of the battery, a lot better than the Magic Keyboard cases coming out next month, which are going to cap out at 5 watts, which may not charge the iPad at all, or if it does, it'll be very, very slow. When it comes to specs, I mean, when it's a concept, guys, the sky's kind of the limit, so go ahead, yeah, say it's an A15X chip and it has 5G in it, whatever, but it's safe to assume that because it's built on an ARM CPU and this thing would not have fans in it at all, it would be really, really fast and high performing. So you would get that insanely good graphics and processing power that you'd expect from a 16-inch MacBook Pro just now in this new form factor, because you're not buying a MacBook, you're still buying an iPad, but it's just getting more MacBook-like features. So because it's larger, I would expect the speakers to improve along with this as well. You may also notice the microphone ports are on both sides of this iPad because there's no centered USB-C port anymore. That means that the microphone quality would hopefully increase as well. And just for the heck of it, yes, the 16-inch display is mini LED, so you get the benefits of an OLED while still retaining 120 hertz and not having to worry about burn-in. So expect the dynamic range on this thing to be amazing. And because I would expect this to be more targeted towards 16-inch MacBook Pro buyers, I'm going to say this thing should ship with 512 gigs of SSD by default. Probably give it a good 8 to 12 gigs of RAM, you know, give it a significant advantage over the other iPads because it's going to be doing so much more power-intensive tasks. And I know iPadOS is good at managing RAM, so it doesn't need, you know, the insane 16 to 32 gigs of RAM that MacBooks have, but still giving it more than the average iPad because you can do so much more with this thing. But of course, the cameras on the back are equal to the cameras we'd expect on our iPad now. We've got the LiDAR sensor, ultra-wide, and the standard lenses. Sure, you can put in a full-fledged 12-megapixel ultra-wide if you want, and I would give these things night mode, portrait mode on the rear-facing camera, though a 16-inch device taking pictures, yeah, I know it'd be kind of crazy. But the reason I think this would be an amazing product is it would show people that you can get a whole lot of work done and have a whole lot of pro features on the iPadOS platform, because as it's getting more pro app support, I think it makes sense to make the hardware closer and closer to that of the device that it is trying to replace. And because there's so many people out there that like the iPad Pro hardware, they love the 120 hertz, they love the Face ID, they love Apple Pencil support, and the fact that you can just pull it off that keyboard case and use it in a tablet when you need to, but then once you want it to be a laptop again, you can just dock it with magnets. The iPad Pro Max is meant to be this little mid-step. It's meant to be a little bit of MacBook Pro and a little bit of iPad Pro mixed into one product that you can get the best of both, so you don't have to worry about, oh man, I only have one USB-C port on my iPad, so I can't really charge it and have external drives plugged into it, or charge it and be importing stuff. So just having all that I/O built in at full speed capacity would give people the flexibility that they have with their MacBook Pro, so they don't feel like they're compromising by going with an iPad. And of course, by giving it that maximized screen real estate, I know a 16-inch iPad sounds crazy, but if it's meant to be used as a laptop the majority of the time, it makes a whole lot of sense to me that you would make it rival that of a 16-inch MacBook Pro, so people switching from MacBooks to iPads don't feel like they're compromising that much. So sort of in a way how the iPad Pros are kind of the competitors of Microsoft Surface Pros, the iPad Pro Max, in my concept, would be the alternative to the Surface Book. You know, it comes with a keyboard and trackpad, but you can undock it and turn it into tablet form when you so desire. This is kind of doing that just in a more simplistic and easier way because you can just pull it off the keyboard case when you need to. But for the majority of the time, I think this would be used in laptop mode, and if something like this came out, I would heavily consider switching to it instead of sticking with a 16-inch MacBook Pro, which of course doesn't have 120 hertz, doesn't have Face ID, doesn't have Touch ID, doesn't have a great camera, doesn't have rear-facing cameras, doesn't have a touchscreen or Apple Pencil support when you need to. So iPad Pro Max to me would be like taking productivity to the absolute maximum, giving people all the hardware necessary from both MacBooks and iPads into one product, and the starting price, I imagine would probably be like $1,900 or something really high like that, but it's not that insane if you consider that it would ship with 512 gigs by default. It would also ship with the Magic Keyboard case, which if you partnered that with the current iPad Pro, you're easily into $1,400 territory. Plus, you're getting the extra I/O, getting better speakers, larger display, mini LED display. So starting at a little bit under $2,000, I think would make it a decent competitor against MacBook Pros. And they could probably price it somewhere in there because they don't have to pay Intel so much for their CPUs or other companies for their GPUs, because all of the internal components on the iPad are built in-house. So in my opinion, that's how they could keep the price pretty low on this compared to a MacBook Pro. But yes, for an iPad, very high. We're into extremely high price points for an iPad. But those higher tiered storage configurations, I would expect to go well into the 2 to 4 terabytes because, again, I'm trying to make sure people coming from 16-inch MacBook Pros aren't losing anything by going with this. But anyway, I know concept videos are kind of confusing for people because it's basically just my wish list. But either way, I wanted to thank TA9480 on Twitter for helping me make these concept photos and this video. You can also find him as Concept Station Design on Instagram. The links for him will be in the description below. And if you enjoy concepts like this, please let me know. I know they don't usually get a lot of views, but I don't care. I just wanted to make this because it's something I've wanted, and I wanted people to have a visual to base off of my requests. So this is what I think Apple should do. There's no leaks, there's no rumors that they're going to do it, but still, I think it'd be a great move. What do you think? Feel free to let me know over on Twitter. Join my Discord. We can chat more about it there. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you in the next one.